Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell podcast. Casey Campbell with you, of course. Pleased to be joined by Nels Williams. How's it going, man?
I'm doing great, Casey. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
Doing well. So kind of talk about, who you are and what you do.
So my name is Nels Williams. I'm a junior at Virginia Tech. Well, rising senior now. I just wrapped up my junior year, and I'm currently majoring and studying in sports media analytics. I do a plethora of stuff in and around Blacksburg. I work for ESPN Blacksburg as a co-host and producer of a weekday radio show called The Drive. I'm on there every day. I also work for a podcast company called The Sons of Saturday as their social media and editor-in-chief, essentially head for both through the school itself and through the communication department. I work for a club called 3304 Sports, where we go and broadcast games, we write about games, and we have in studio networks about games. So, not networks, but we have an in studio on campus where we have the whole shebang. We have an entire control room as well as a studio with state of the art cameras, state of the art equipment, where we report on those games as well. So I'm doing a lot, I'm doing a lot. And this summer I'm also working for the Pulaski River Turtles. It's about half hour outside of Blacksburg as they're in host MC and team reporter as well. So they are a summer ball collegiate team where, D1 players come in from around the nation. I believe the farthest player we got is about out in Iowa or Minnesota, out there in the Midwest, coming to Pulaski, and they play in the Summer Collegiate Baseball League. So I do a lot, doing a lot, and it's been very busy down at Virginia Tech.
Yeah. So how'd you get in this? Why did you get in this? Why did you want to get in this?
So I growing up rather outside of Northern Virginia. Essentially, I was watching DC sports all growing up, and I just had a passion for just the game itself and the story about the game and just the narrative about the game and how the people who are on broadcast for Nationals games and Capitals games, which obviously have the Nationals flag back there, listening to guys like Bob Carpenter and Charlie Sloan and the 106.7 The Fan team, as well as Joe Beninati from the Washington Capitals, hearing those guys weave throughout the stories and their storytelling. That's what I really grew up with. And obviously DC sports in the 2010s, when I was really, really into those sports, still am, but when they were at their heyday, essentially, especially with the Nationals, just watching those experiences and just hearing how those guys were able to, do the narrative of the game, I thought, you know what, maybe I can do that. And so my sophomore year of high school, I visited Virginia Tech, and the sports media and analytics program, I believe, started in 2017, 2016, around the time when I was a sophomore, junior in high school. And seeing what they had to offer and seeing what the communication department had to offer, I realized that if I went there, then I would have a good shot and good experience getting into to hopefully launch myself into the sports world. So just growing up around that, even especially well as hockey, I'm a huge hockey fan. I love my Washington Capitals. I watch Stanley Cup playoffs every year, every spring. I'm a firm believer it's the best playoffs in the world. Hearing the commentators and just hearing how passionate they are about it, I just realized that I could do it. And growing up as well, I would just sit in front of the TV and just like in my head or like, calmly whisper like, oh, Ovechkin across to Backstrom, down low. Like I would commentate myself. And I realized that, hey, I could do this. Because if you ever tried to commentate a game by yourself, it's hard. My friends will always be like, oh, do it, do it, do it. And even on whenever playing video games, such as like Rocket League or Call of Duty or whatnot, they're like, oh, commentate the game. And I'll do it as a joke, but whenever they would try to do it, they would always stumble over their words. They couldn't do it, but it just feels so effortless. And that's the beauty of it, is that I just get so wrapped up just in the game itself. And just it's just one of those things, and it's a dream of mine. And I'm so thankful and I'm so happy that I'm hopefully able to achieve that dream someday in the future.
Yeah. So just kind of talk about the experiences that you got to do this year.
This year, through 3304 Sports, I was very involved with their reporting team as well as their writing team. And through the Sons of Saturday as well, I was actually their men's basketball lead beat writer. So in the fall for football games, what 3304 Sports does is we go on about every Friday morning. We do a preview of the show. So we have a panel, we have our own reporters, we have a little like production room where people come in to basically simulate essentially a TV broadcast. And then Saturday itself, for 3304 Sports, we'd have commentators go out there. And then in the fall and in the winter, when men's basketball started up for the Sons of Saturday, which is a Virginia Tech focused podcast, I had already been working with them since August, and they approached me and said, hey, we want you to be basketball beat writer. So I took the job. And so I was able to go to every men's basketball home game, and as well as the ACC tournament too in March, and just cover Virginia Tech. So that was an experience I'll never forget. And then for 3304 Sports as well, we would do basketball reports every week. And then in the spring, we do baseball and softball hits as well. So I've been doing a lot. And then for ESPN Blacksburg too, they needed a new co-host. Their old co-host was departing, and I was approached about that. They essentially were like, "Hey, the host has heard about what you do. They've seen your stuff. We'd love to have you on." And I didn't really know what I was really getting into. I knew obviously I was going to be going on for radio, but I had never done radio before. ESPN Blacksburg is purely radio, and I the entire time of my college, broadcasting career, it was all in front of a camera. And so I had to learn very quickly, the cadences of talking over the radio, how you approach something, and how you essentially have to paint and tell a story. And some of the skills that I got from broadcasting the games translated over to radio, because when we do broadcast for 3304 Sports, it's not synced to any TV. It's all radio. It's all radio style. And the radio style of broadcasting is a lot different than TV style, because radio style for baseball, essentially, you got to say the 2-0 pitch paints the outside corner. That'll get in there for strike one. Well, over TV, it's essentially, oh, that's in there, strike one, 2-1 count. It's a lot different. So been working for ESPN Blacksburg since January, and I've just been super busy and super blessed for what I have to do.
Yeah. Biggest experience that you got to is there like a moment that you did that kind of really stood out?
Definitely. Oh man, the ACC tournament, going to the ACC tournament on Virginia Tech's communication department's behalf, and essentially covering the games, every game for 3304 Sports was an experience I'll never forget. But the most special part was that there was a student panel of current ACC network and some writers for publications such as the Roanoke Times Dispatch. They had a panel in front of us, and we essentially sat in the media room where players and coaches would go after the game before you go to the locker room and ask them there individually. They had a panel in front of us, and they just talked to us about their experiences, and I got a lot of their contact information. I got to personally meet these people you see on TV. One of the most special things about that was I got to meet Luke Hancock, who is a former George Mason men's basketball and Louisville men's basketball player who now works for the ACC network. And I actually grew up going to George Mason basketball games because that's right down the street from me. And when head coach Jim Larinaga, who's now at Miami men's basketball, was there, they, were constantly in the NCAA tournament. It was a really good team at the time, it was the CAA. Now they're in the A10, and Luke Hancock's one of my favorite players growing up. He just drained threes like nobody's business, and I realized he was there. And so I walked up to them, he was about to, about like 10, 15 minutes away from going on. And he was just standing there on the sidelines, just eating beef jerky. I was like, I need to introduce myself to him. So I walked up, got his contact information, and throughout the week, we'd be passing each other in the hall. I'd say, hey, how you doing? Just really brief stuff like that. But the way that we operated was that everybody essentially got a chance to go in front of the camera after the games were over on the hardwood. Everybody was able to do stand-up. Everybody was there. So we were there about at the same time as when the ESPN and ACC network guys were getting out. So we would be standing on the hardwood, standing on the court, mics in hand, talking to the camera. And you would see, people like Kelsey Riggs, Luke Hancock, all coming down from their studio to us, like to walk next to us from where we were to go down to the tunnel and to the buses. So, we talked to them. It was such an interesting and kind of facade breaking experience being able to personally meet these people and just talk to them. The most amazing part about it was that after the championship game, all the media members were on the court, like we were on the court because we had passes, and they were on the court as well. And so they were about wrapping up, and I, ran into Luke and we talked for a bit, and I was like, hey, can I actually interview you? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Sure. So, sure enough, I stood next to Luke Hancock and I interviewed him, and I just asked him, his thoughts and opinions about, professionally about, what he thought of the game, what he thought of Duke, what he thought for their NCAA tournament chances. And I don't remember any of that. I blacked out. There was actually a moment I'll never forget before I blacked out, like memory wise, was the red light of the camera came on. And I remember just standing there, and I just thought 8-year-old self would be losing his mind right now if he realized that 13 years later, he would be standing next to a guy that he adored as a kid, and the red light came on. And this is so funny. The red light came on. I stood there and I froze for like a second or two. And before in the unfinished clip, you could see Luke kind of look at me, and I look back at the camera, and then I started, and I was just like, I didn't even know what to ask him. I after all that time of like thinking like, oh, I need to interview Luke Hancock, I have no idea what my first question was or my opening statement was. And we got through it. It ended up pretty good. It ended up like a decent interview. But afterwards, I remember just like standing there, and I was just a complete shock and awe. And I was like, that was one of the coolest things, and probably the coolest thing that I've done so far was going to the AC tournament, meeting a childhood basketball hero in Luke Hancock, and then not only interviewing him, getting his contact information, interviewing him as well. So that's an experience I'll never forget.
Yeah. So what's this? You mentioned what you're going to do this summer. So what's that going to be like for you?
So I got two things going on this summer. I'm working full time for ESPN Blacksburg every weekday at espnblacksburg.com nationally if you want to listen in. Going live from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, discussing Virginia Tech sports, national sports. And then once that's over, I'll be heading down about half an hour, 45 minutes away from Blacksburg to Calfee Park in Pulaski, Virginia. I'll be working as the in-host MC as well as the team reporter for the Pulaski River Turtles. They're a summer D1 baseball team. They play in the Appalachian League, and they're almost always atop the league. Ballpark is absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. For anybody watching or listening out there, if you can make a trip out to Calfee Park in Pulaski, definitely do it. I believe in 2021 they won a national award for the best minor league stadium. That, depending on the capacity in the United States. It was built in the 1930s. It was as a part of a public works project to like infuse baseball in America. So you can definitely see it's like they made renovations and upgrades a few years ago. They put a few $1 million into it, but it's a fusion of the old and the new, similar to Fenway and Wrigley Field, but in this minor league park. So I'll be the guy who's going to the stands doing giveaways. I'll be the guy who's doing the t-shirt tosses, leading all that. And then I'll also be doing pregame and postgame reports. And if their play-by-play broadcaster can't make it, then I'll be doing the play-by-play stuff. So fortunately, there's a few other Virginia Tech students there, so I'm not going into it fully blind, but I'm really excited to do both, and it's going to be a pretty busy summer with them.
Yeah. So kind of talk about like what's the biggest thing that you kind of like, oh, I got so much better at this year.
I would definitely have to say, just talking in front of a camera. Last summer, I did an internship with the DC Grays, same deal, summer league baseball team. And looking back at what I was doing my sophomore year versus my junior year, it was like night and day. I submitted the Sportscaster Talent Association of America's Gym Nance Reel Award, submitted a reel for that. And essentially, really shortly, it's just the best or it's essentially a competition through where other collegiate students are able to submit their broadcast reel and their portfolio in to a chance to win the Jim Nance Award. And if you win the award, you get to meet Jim Nance and speak in front of a crowd and whatnot. But through the reel itself, you got to put together a plethora of stuff, like your play-by-play, your team reporting, whole 9 yards. And I realized that, for some of my clips, I had a lot of clips, but I wanted to throw in a different blend of, talking football, talking basketball, talking baseball. And when I looked at my stuff from sophomore year, I physically cringed. It's like, what is this? What is this version of myself? Like, how was I ever thinking that this was good? And then it kind of dawned on me that like, dang, like I got a lot better at this. And just like the way that, the cadence flows, just talking in front of a camera and finding your rhythm in that, like I completely found that last summer, and that definitely helped. And then I just hit the ground running with that. And again, looking at my old stuff from like my freshman and sophomore year, it's just night and day. And I'm hoping that next year, by the time that I submit another reel for another chance at the Jim Nance Award, I hope I look back on my junior year stuff and go, what was I doing? What was I doing here as well? So every year I'm getting better. Just, speaking in front of a camera and finding the cadence and the eloquency and whatnot.
Yeah. And should ask you this, what are your plans for your senior year? What do you feel like do you know what you're going to be doing?
Well, I know that I'll be continuing to work with ESPN Blacksburg every weekday. I'll be going on air as the co-host for that show. But in the fall, I'll have the opportunity to do some play-by-play for football games as well as team reporting. So I'll be on the sidelines for most Virginia Tech football games. I still definitely want to experience at least one home game as a student. But then I think as well, I'll still be doing the basketball beat reporting, whether or not that's writing or if I'm actually on the court shooting videos, similar to what a news reporter would be doing. That's to be determined. But those are the plans of what I'm hoping to do. And just in my senior year, I'm just hoping to soak it all in. I mean, these past 3 years have absolutely flown by, and Virginia Tech has been amazing to me, and I've loved every minute that I've been there. So I'm just really trying to make every day matter and try not to waste a single day.
All right. Well, Nels, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. And let's have you on again sometime.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Case. I really appreciate it.